Well, thanks so much, everybody. And I've heard that it's been a great conference. It seems like there's a lot of momentum building, not only in this conference, but in our economy overall, which is just terrific news. So as mentioned, I want to chat with you this afternoon about the topic of creativity and innovation. Something that doesn't only apply to product breakthroughs, but specifically also applies to the manufacturing process, driving efficiency, driving gains, driving safety. So before we dive in, I want you to think, though, for a second. We all remember Hurricane Katrina, right? Well, imagine this. It's 1 week before the hurricane. You know it's coming. What do? How do you prepare? Well, in 2008, an economic hurricane tore through our country, and the results were devastating. People lost their jobs, their hopes, their dreams. Safety gave way to uncertainty. Comfort gave way to fear. Today, we're living in a world of dizzying speed, exponential complexity, and ruthless competition. And what happened in 2008 was something even more profound. The rules of the game had fundamentally changed forever. We could no longer rely on past models in order to win. We had to forge new ground. We had to think differently. So how do you do that in this world with all this complexity and all these challenges? How do we as individuals prepare, and how do we get ready 1 week before the hurricane? So I want to ask you a question. Maybe you can help me identify a specific company. Which company's mission statement is this? To organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Anybody? Google. All right. That's going to get a little trickier. Which company had basically that same mission statement for 219 years in a row before Google even was founded? Anybody? I heard it. Encyclopedia. Encyclopedia Britannica. This was the Google of their day. You know, I wonder, by the way, you know how we use the word Google as a verb, as in I Googled him? You think 150 years ago people were running around saying, let me get right back to you. I got to go Britannica that. This company was in the information age 100 years before the Industrial Revolution. Great company, lots of success, all kinds of imagination, distributed sales force. Everything was going great until the hurricane struck. Until a force of disruptive creativity came along and changed the game forever. Microsoft launches Encarta, a digital encyclopedia. And while Britannica is still in business today, they never recovered. They're still reeling from that force, those disruptive winds. So everything's going great. Microsoft has all the power in the world, all the money you can imagine, smart people, everything's going great, and they become the dominant source of information on our planet. Until once again, the hurricane strikes. And along comes a startup, a non-profit startup, and knocks the giant off their bearing, off the castle. And with all their money and all their talent and all their intelligence and everything else, Microsoft ended up shutting down Encarta in 2009. What will displace Wikipedia? We can hardly imagine it today, but it's going to happen. It's only a matter of time. It took 200 years for Britannica to fall, only 15 for Microsoft. So what we're seeing is these disruptive forces, these hurricane-strength winds, are coming at an increasing pace with increasing force. It's 1 week before the hurricane. We know it's coming. What do? The thing is, today, it's always 1 week before the hurricane. In our businesses, even in our families, and in our communities. How do we respond with a creative approach? Well, despite all these challenges, there have been companies that have done exactly that. My friends at Groupon launched in the eye of the storm in 2008 and have created billions of dollars of wealth in just a few short years. Right in my hometown in Detroit, Ford Motor Company. They were facing the same seemingly insurmountable challenges as their competitors. And while Chrysler and General Motors were busy filing for bankruptcy protection, Ford doubled down on innovation. And today they're achieving record profits as a result. So I'd like to challenge your thinking about creativity and innovation for a second. So often we think about that as saying, oh, well, creativity is involved if I'm going to invent the next iPad or launch a new website. But that's the R&D guy's job. That's not my job in manufacturing. That's somebody else's. That's the CEO's job. Well, today, creativity and innovation applies to us all. Every individual in organizations at all levels of the org chart, it's part of our job now. It's part of our job to drive the organization forward through disruptive creativity, as well as everyday creativity, those little acts that add up to giant things over time. Unfortunately, most companies don't do that. Most companies are so busy being heads down, they don't even see the hurricanes on the horizon. You've all heard that expression, being heads down, right? Well, think about what that means. Let's try it. What do you see? You see nothing. And look, it's important to be heads down. If you're on a deadline, I'm not saying don't work hard or anything like that. But there are times when you need to be heads down, but there are also times you need to be heads up. Because when you're heads up, you notice things. You notice what your competitors are doing. You see all the possibilities and new ways to reinvent your plans for future success. You see new technology trends. So I would argue that we need to spend more time as a society and as business folks being heads up, looking at the possibilities as opposed to just concentrating on the to-do list of the day. Now today, nearly every industry is in the midst of massive upheaval, certainly as applied to manufacturing. So what do? How do we prepare? Well, companies as an entity can't be creative. People can. So it's up to all of us. It's up to us as individuals to be ready 1 week before the hurricane, to be ready and prepared to respond in a creative way when those challenges, which are inevitable, are coming in our direction. It's time to be heads up. Now, unfortunately, though, in our country, we have a fairly big problem. And that big problem is that our creativity is declining rather than increasing. Cover story in Newsweek last year. They talked about the creativity crisis. So they do a test called the Torrance test, researchers. And they've been doing this test for decades. They measure creativity in kids. And since the 50s, creativity in the U.S. has been on the increase. Until about 15 years ago, we suffered a sharp decline. Why? What's going on? Well, quick story about my daughter, Chloe. Last year, Chloe was in 4th grade. And the teacher gives her an assignment. Our teacher says, go draw a bear. So she's like, cool. So she draws this purple, funky-shaped bear, and she's all excited to hand it to the teacher. So she runs up, and she was waiting for praise and admiration. You know what the teacher says? Bears aren't that color. Bears aren't that shape. Go back and redo it. That's not what bears look like. So what happened in that moment wasn't that my daughter lost her creativity. That's her gift as a human being. What happened is that she learned a terrible lesson. Don't take risks. Don't go out on a limb. Don't shine. That's not what bears look like, really. Anyone ever see one of these? What is this? Anybody? I heard it, an ugly doll. Is that what bears look like? Ugly dolls were the 2007 Toy of the Year. Huge entrepreneurial success story of a company that makes cool bears instead of boring bears. In fact, when Sasha Obama went to her first day of school in Washington, D.C., she went clutching tightly to the security of her ugly doll. You see what's going on here, folks? There's a mismatch. We teach this, but we reward that. We're taught in school to follow the rules, guess what the teacher knows, there's only one right answer, and whatever you do, don't make mistakes. But if you do that in the real world, that's the path to mediocrity. And instead, if you do exactly the opposite, that's how you win. Another study was working to measure the impact that schools have on kids' creativity. So they asked kids entering kindergarten, they said, okay, are you creative? Turns out 98% of their kids self-identified as being creative. They asked that same question to graduating high school seniors. The numbers dropped a little bit. Anyone guess what they dropped to? 15, 20, 70, 12? 2%. How does that happen? 98% going in, down to 2%. How does that happen? What's happening, unfortunately, is that we don't grow into creativity, we're growing out of it. And our schools, which should be preparing us for the future, are teaching us exactly the wrong thing for our kids to win as they get into adulthood. Now think back about when you were a kid. There was no such thing as a cardboard box, was there? It was a fort or a Barbie mansion or a pirate ship. Put a bunch of kids in a room with toys and art supplies, they'll play for hours with endless imagination. You put us in that same room, 45 seconds later, we're checking our BlackBerries and our iPhones. So over time, our systems and our schools and our bureaucracies, we start out as these vibrant kids, but it beats it out of us. And we become the thing that we fear the most. Grumpy adults. AKA our parents. And by the way, not the cool parents of the Viagra commercials. Speaking of kids, I built this project with my son Noah, who's 13. Lego project. And we were like proud of it. It took forever. And I started to reflect on it though. And I said, wait a minute, something is not right here. And I'll show you what happened. I brought with me the manual for this project. Let's take a look. 192 steps of detailed instructions. I started thinking, is this really what we need to be teaching kids? I mean, look at this thing, right? It's crazy. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, this is what Legos looked like. They were modular pieces, and when I played Legos, you'd build something with your imagination, you'd bust it up, you'd build something again. Today we're learning, instead of nurturing our imagination, we're just learning how to follow instructions. The exact wrong thing that we need to win in the business world. Now, this is not all bad news, because there's some great news. 2008, Harvard University does a study, and they ask the age-old question, is creativity born or is it developed? Is it nature or nurture? Here's what they found. Creativity, in fact, is 85% learned behavior. Now think about what that means. That means you and I, on our groggiest day, have 85% the creative potential as Mozart or Da Vinci or Picasso. The problem is that we don't feel that way because we haven't developed those skills. We just learned, in fact, that 98% of us don't feel that way at all. Why? Well, there's a couple reasons. One of them is labeling. We think that musicians are creative and, accountants or statisticians are not. So we attribute job title with levels of creativity. I'll tell you, I know professional musicians in major U.S. symphonies that play the notes beautifully. They're wonderful technicians. Yet they're really not exhibiting much creativity at all. And certainly we've all seen how creative accountants can get. Next big factor is fear. We're so afraid to let our ideas come out to play that we hold them back, and we're actually doing our companies and ourselves a huge disservice. And we've all done it. You're sitting in a meeting and you have a great idea. And you say, oh, but if I share the idea, what's my boss going to think? Or if it was such a great idea, someone else probably would have already come up with it. Or who's going to fund it? And if I let this idea out and it gets funded, it's my responsibility, and if it doesn't work out, then what happens? So we let our fear hold our best thinking back. The other thing is that we're often in environments, could be at work, could be in community organizations, that are restrictive. We don't give ourselves and each other the permission to be creative, the permission to go out on a limb and make some mistakes. So these factors, again, are holding us back and disallowing us from reaching our true creative potential. I'm a jazz musician. Originally, I've been playing for almost 30 years, believe it or not. And jazz is a neat form of music because you spontaneously create. It's all made up as you go. Unfortunately, though, in the business world, we've gotten away from the jazz side of it, and we're a little bit more on that classical side. And what's happened is there's a shift going on. In other words, in the industrial age, and even in the information age, up until the financial crisis, it was okay to be like a symphony orchestra. Tightly orchestrated, led by one conductor, everybody does what they're told, end of the day, everything's fine, they sound the same every time, keep doing the same thing. Keep following the rules. Today, the world doesn't work that way, though. Today, startups come and eat the lunch of big companies because they think like jazz musicians. Jazz musicians work in small groups. They're collaborative. They're constantly changing. It's fluid. You go out on a limb. You make mistakes. In fact, an audience will punish somebody who plays it safe. They celebrate risk-taking. They celebrate adventure. That's what we need to inject into our companies, into our plants, and even in our families. Now, by the way, when I go out to do a jazz gig, you go play music. When we're kids, we go out to play. Athletes go out to play. What do? We go to work. Ugh, what a horrible term. Right? It feels like you're trading your soul for money. How dreadful. What if we changed it? What if instead of saying going out to work, we went out to play? Bye, honey, going out to play for the day. What if instead of having workforce management, we had playforce management? What if instead of working through our problems, we played through them? Again, we know that kids have that sense of wonder and imagination and creativity. Maybe if we play a little bit in our workforce, we can get it back. So let's do it. Let's do it right here, right now. Let's play a little bit. Now, a really simple way to turn your creativity on is a fun warm-up exercise you can do before brainstorming meetings, etc., is this. Imagine that this picture is a snapshot from a movie. So in other words, this happened but in real time. So there's story leading up to it. There's something about to happen afterwards. So maybe you could just help tell me what could be going on in this movie. What's happening here? And more importantly, how do you think this woman is feeling? Anybody? Scared someone's following her? What are some other ideas that maybe are going on here? So kid maybe is in the back seat. She's getting what? She's getting a call? Yep. Oh, getting caught? Oh, maybe a police came up. She's about to get a ticket. She could have just gotten in an accident. She ran over her husband, and now she's going to back up and get him once more. I like that. Now that's creative. Now, how did you guys know this? Weird. I mean, you didn't read the script, but you just made it up, didn't you? How'd you know? Well, what just happened, believe it or not, is you tapped into that creative side. We all have it inside of us. Let's do another one. What's going on here? He's getting all the credit. Maybe it was her idea. I think you're right. She has to go to the bathroom. She's waiting for her hall pass. They're watching a video on YouTube, maybe an inappropriate one. No thanks. She's pissed. How do you think she feels, by the way? Upset, stressed, bummed out? Left out. Now again, what's happening is you're creating this script in your mind. That's your creativity coming to play. So start the next meeting that you have, grab some random pictures from the internet or from a magazine and ask your team about this. All of a sudden, people start turning on their imagination. They're getting warmed up to create. Now, what we're doing basically is we're awakening our curiosity. And curiosity is the building block of creativity. You can do so by asking these three phrases again and again and again with yourselves and your team. Why? What if? And why not? Why? What if? Why not? I'll give you an example. There's an entrepreneur in New York, and she launches a company. She's going to manufacture girls' socks. So what would normally the 101 playbook be? We'd say, all right, let's go source it overseas and manufacture as cheap as we possibly can. We're going to make white utilitarian socks. We're going to fly to Bentonville, Arkansas, beg Walmart to buy them. We'll sell them a dozen for $1, and that's our business model. Well, this woman did something different. She said, why? What if? And why not? Why? Why do socks have to be boring? What if socks were fun and colorful? Why do socks come in sets of 2? You always lose one. That's kind of annoying. So she challenged conventional wisdom. She disrupted the status quo. And she launched a cool company called Little Mismatched. Now, Little Mismatched, they're colorful. They're not boring. They're fun and expressive. You can't buy a pair of socks that match. They're color coordinated, but they don't match. In fact, you can't buy a pair at all because they come in sets of 3 or 5. So these socks, instead of selling for a dollar, they sell for $14 for a set of 3. Hugely successful company, went from 0 to $30 million in revenue in 4 years. And she did so because she challenged conventional wisdom. She got creative. Anybody have a preteen daughter? Any chance? Oh, here we go. Little souvenir for you. Now, I know we heard from our friends at Toyota here at this conference, and they pioneered a technique which you've probably heard of, but it's a great way to get your curiosity going, which is the 5 whys. And basically what it is you're zeroing in on a business problem. You ask why, get the answer and say, why that? Get the answer again and say, why that? And if you do it 5 times in a row, it's amazing the curiosity and the creativity that will come on out. So I want to show you a quick demonstration of the 5 whys in action by comedian Louis C.K. Let's take a look.
See a mother with her baby in McDonald's, and the little girl says something like, "Mama, what are those people doing over there?" And she just says, just shut up and eat your French fries. You know? And you think, what a mean mother. Why doesn't she just answer her and open her horizons? Well, you don't know what you're talking about. Because when a kid asks why something, you tell her why. She wants to know why that. And then you tell her why that. She wants to know why that. And you try to come up with an answer that stops, but you can't. And she takes every idea and deconstructs it to the point where I don't even know who I am anymore when we're done talking. Like the other day she says to me, Papa, why is it hot? Because it's summertime. Why? Because it's that time of year. Why? Because the sun is closer to the earth. Why? Because it's tilted on its axis. Why? I don't know. Why? I just didn't pay attention when they taught me this stuff in school. I didn't really listen. I didn't think it was important. Why? Because I smoked a lot of pot and I didn't have any values. Why? Because my parents didn't raise me very well. They just didn't pay attention to me. Why? Because they just had sex in a car and here I am and they resent me for taking their youth. Why? Because they have no moral compass because they had bad parents and it just keeps going like that. Why? Because there's no God and we're alone and there's no point to anything. I'm only stopping light to you. It goes on for hours and it gets so abstract. It's like, why? Well, because some things are and some things are not. Why? Because things that are not can't be. Why? Because then nothing would not be. Something has to isn't. Everything can't is. Why? Just shut up and eat your French fries, all right? Just shut up.
Louis C.K. doing the 5 whys. Who's this? Waldo. So we all read books, maybe to our kids or grandkids, and they look something like this. And so what do? You're like, where's Waldo? Where's Waldo? Where's Waldo? And what happens is that your awareness goes through the roof. You notice all these things. You notice the weird guy with the purple pants, or how many balloons does the little girl have? All these things that you would normally pass by, you notice because you have where's Waldo level of awareness. What if we took where's Waldo level of awareness to us to work every day? We can turn it on and off, obviously, by looking at a book. Why can't we do it in the job force, in the play force? Well, I'd like to ask you to do so. Now that we know what it is, we can turn it on just like that. Maybe you can help me use your where's Waldo level of awareness to tell me what's wrong with this picture. Right. I think I heard it. FedEx is sending an envelope to UPS. It's kind of weird. Well, I want to share with you something that happened to us at our company. It's a true story. So ePrize, we do digital marketing for major brands. Coca-Cola here in Atlanta is actually our largest client. But we work with everyone from Nike to Microsoft, etc. So anyway, we win this client, UPS. We're all excited. And we had to mail them their contract. See where this is going? Sure enough, we do this. So just think about the mechanics of that. You have to write UPS. There's a big, how does that happen? So we mailed them the contract in a FedEx envelope. Can you imagine the driver walking up to UPS headquarters? Got a package. So I get a call from my client. Let's just say she was displeased. I learned some new vocabulary words that day, actually. So anyway, I go to our team member and I say, like, how does this happen? FedEx, UPS, like what? And here's what they told me. She said, Josh, our contract is with FedEx. Not my problem. So the thing is this. That was a wonderful, talented, caring human. She wasn't a bad person, wasn't a bad team member. But she was heads down. She was so focused on the task at hand that she didn't bother to look up. She didn't bother to have Where's Waldo level of awareness. And that stuff can get solved so quickly. Why do safety problems happen on a line? Why do defects come when they shouldn't? Perhaps it's because we don't bring that Where's Waldo level of awareness when we need it the most. We've all heard the expression, I had this great idea and I was in the shower, right? It's a cliche. When was the last time you heard someone say, all right, I'm sitting at my cube and I'm updating Facebook and I'm sending a tweet and checking email and getting a voicemail and checking down the hall and bam, I'm hit with a lightning bolt of inspiration. It doesn't happen. Now we know for centuries, artists and musicians, the most creative people of all, went to beautiful places for inspiration. Even here, we're in this amazing environment and we're sparking all kinds of ideas and networking and learning. So if we know that environment matters, we know that environment plays a huge role in creativity, why does most of corporate America look like this? It's more like a sensory deprivation chamber. We put our people in windowless rooms with bad fluorescent lighting and no stimuli, and then we wonder why we have bland ideas. Now, I'm not saying to go redecorate. If you can, great. But what I would suggest that you do is if it's time to be heads down and get something done in the factory, great. But if it's time to come up with some fresh new ideas, maybe go on a field trip. Go to your local art museum. Go for a walk in the park. But anything that you can do to surround yourself with inspiration is going to drive creativity. Give you an example. A cool company in Chicago named Catalyst Ranch rents out their space for brainstorming ideas and that kind of thing. I mean, look at the texture and the color and think about where you would have better ideas. Environment matters. I want to share a technique with you that you can use immediately. That's the cool part, by the way, about creativity, is you don't have to like study it for years and get a master's degree and practice it 24/7. It doesn't require compliance. It's all our gift as human beings. We all have it. Here's a way to bring it out. A friend of mine, Tony Sosnick, comes to me in 1999. He says, Josh, I'm going to launch a cosmetics company. I was like, great, sounds cool. He said, here's the twist, for men. I said, for men? Here's what he said. He said, look, if I launched a female cosmetics company, I'd have like the 174th mover advantage. I'd be buried in the herd. But on the other hand, if I launched a guy's cosmetics company, hair care products, lotion, this type of thing, I could be a category of one. So Tony goes and launches this company. Today he's in 3,000 stores around the world. Biggest cosmetics company for men. Great success story. And he did so because he did exactly the opposite. He stuck his finger in the eye of the complacent incumbents and tried something different. So this is a very simple brainstorming technique that you can do immediately. Here's all you do. You grab a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle of it. On the one side, if you're trying to solve a problem, marketing issue, manufacturing challenge, safety issue, whatever the specific challenge is, on the one side of that column, you list all the ways you've done it before. All the things that are conventional wisdom. What does everybody do in the industry? All the things your competitors are doing. And then with zero judgment, don't analyze it, literally next to each of those on the other side of the line, write the polar opposite. If everybody else uses these type of safety goggles, what if we did something totally different? If everybody else does it this way, what if we did it exactly the opposite? Now here's what's going to happen. It's going to force you to come up with ideas that you wouldn't ordinarily allow yourself to do. Once you look down that list, you may have some gems, or even if not, you're going to have new ways of thinking about stuff. You might say, okay, this doesn't make sense as is, but I can use that little nugget and take it to something that will make sense. Give it a shot. What do you got to lose? The opposite. Question for you. How many people, by show of hands, had sushi for Thanksgiving dinner? Nobody, huh? Weird. Probably turkey, stuffing, gravy, mashed potatoes, cranberry. What was that? Tamales. All right, well, that's kind of cool. That's a little different. I like that. Now, is that a tradition, by the way, in your family or your... Oh, that's good. Okay, cool. Well, I like where you're going with that because the thing is this. In family settings, we follow traditions. And traditions are great in a family. I had turkey. I'm happy. Next year, I'm going to do the same thing. Well, traditions are great in families, but they can be deadly in companies. Because a tradition, by definition, means that you're doing the way you've always done it. You're saluting the flag of the past. For most of us, we didn't have to sit around and say, well, I'm having 20 people over for dinner. What should I cook? We already knew. Great in a family can be terrible in a business. Another example of traditions. I was carving a pumpkin last Halloween, and I'm like we all do. You carve it from the top, you put your arms in, you dig out all the gook, you get all messy. Then you go to light it, you got to put the candle in, you get second-degree burns on your hand. You try to carry the thing around, you got to get weight underneath it, and you drop it half the time. So anyway, I'm complaining about it to my partner, Dan Gilbert. And Danny starts laughing at me, and he says, Josh, you're doing it all wrong. Why don't you carve it from the bottom? It blew my mind. Think about it. You carve the thing from the bottom, you get to use gravity, and all the gook just flops right out. When you go to light it, you take the base, put a candle on it, and then gently place the pumpkin over the top. When you want to move it around, you get to use the intended handle that nature gave us. It's brilliant, right? It makes no sense. Now that you know this, you will never carve a pumpkin the same way. But I didn't think of that. Most people don't think of that because we just do it the way we've always done it. You learn something new, right? So this is what drives progress. And if this was a company, the company that carved from the bottom would be winning in the marketplace, and the good old-fashioned company that carved from the top would be scratching their head saying, how did our competitive advantage go away? Speaking of Dan, he runs this company called Quicken Loans, and they capture very sensitive data when they're processing a mortgage. Social security number, tax information, that type of stuff. So it's very important that they put it in a shredder bin so it's confidential. Anyway, they were having a problem with compliance. We've probably never had any compliance issues in this room, right? Yeah. So what does he do? How do you do it? He could bark at his team members and yell at them and pound his fist. Instead, he said, let's get creative. Let's try something different. All right, is coming up with a funny-looking shredder bin going to make the cover of Business Week? No. Did it make a difference at Quicken Loans? Absolutely. So I really want to reinforce the idea of everyday creativity. Those little teeny acts like this. Was it groundbreaking and revolutionary and it's going to be remembered for years? No. But it made a difference. All of a sudden compliance went up and people were having fun with it. There's so many opportunities for you in your plants and in your companies when you have Where's Waldo level of awareness, when you look up instead of look down, and allow yourself and your team those little sparks of change that can add up to be giant things. To keep ourselves moving forward at ePrides, we always had this little fable that we told, which is this. Little girl, 10 years old, cooking meatloaf in the kitchen with her mom. Now, before they put it in the oven, like they've always done, they cut both ends of the meatloaf off. Little girl gets curious, and she says, Mom, why do we cut the ends of the meatloaf off? So the mom scratches her head and kind of laughs, and she says, gee, I don't know. That's the way we've always done it. That's the way my mom taught me to do it. Let's call Grandma and ask. So they get on the phone, they call Grandma, say, Grandma, we're making meatloaf, we cut both ends off. Why do we cut the ends off? Grandma starts laughing. She goes, gosh, I don't know. That's the way I've always done it. That's the way my mom taught me how to do it. So they got all curious now. So you get Grandma and little girl and Mom in the car, and they drive over to see Great-Grandma. They go see Great-Grandma, and they tell her the story. We're making meatloaf. We're cutting off the ends. Why do we do it? Well, the Great-Grandma laughs hysterically and says, I don't know why you're doing it. I used to do it because I didn't have a big enough pan. So it's a meatloaf. And we look at our company, ePrides, we're always on the lookout for meatloafs. That's like a term that we use now. So we say, oh, is that a meatloaf? And the idea is simply challenging the way we do our job. Always being obsessed with finding a better way. This ugly fish is called a pike. Now, pike are sharp-teethed freshwater fish that are predatory. They eat the little fish. Well, I want to share an experiment done with you by scientists. Here's what they do. They take a huge tank, and on one end of the tank, they drop in little fish that the pike would enjoy eating. On the other end, they put a pike, but in between, they insert a glass divider. Here's what happens every time the experiment is conducted. Pike sees the fish, goes on over, bam, hits his nose into the glass. Dusts himself off a little bit, says, I can try again, bam, into the glass. Well, after a dozen or so times of this, the pike realizes that he's not getting to his dinner. Gets frustrated and sinks to the bottom of the tank. Then the scientists remove the glass barrier. Well, you'd think that the pike now sees the barrier's gone, goes to town. It's a feast. But he doesn't. He hangs out at the bottom of the tank. Little fish start getting more brave, getting courageous. So they swim all around. And literally, and I've seen videos of this, they swim right in front of that pike's nose. And you would think that the pike is just going to get fat, dumb, and happy. He's going to have a ball eating these fish. But instead, every time this experiment is conducted, that pike lingers at the bottom and dies of starvation. Now, scientists call this the pike syndrome, which is simply this. It's letting an imaginary barrier get in the way of progress. An imaginary barrier that's holding that pike back from reaching his potential. What are your imaginary barriers? Think about all the things that we tell ourselves. I didn't grow up in the right neighborhood. I'm not tall enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not good looking enough. I didn't go to the right school. So we tell ourselves all these things, and they hold us back from reaching our true potential. Which makes me think about this guy. This guy is named Joseph Hudica. He's 8. He's been dubbed the little entrepreneur. So Joseph Hudica invents this game. It's a cross between checkers and hockey called Pucks, P-U-C-K-Z. This is a downloadable game for iPod and iPad and that type of thing. Sells for 99 cents a download, and he's selling thousands of them a day. Didn't go to the right college. This kid didn't go to the right middle school. But he's not letting his imaginary barriers hold him back, and neither should we. Finished a book just now called Disciplined Dreaming, A Proven System to Drive Breakthrough Creativity. And besides my own experience as an entrepreneur and also as a jazz musician, I had the privilege of interviewing 200 thought leaders. I interviewed artists, musicians, billionaires, entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders, and got their take on creativity and learned some best practices, and then tried to boil it down into this book, into the system. Anyway, I wanted to share a couple quick things from the book. One company that I interviewed offers every team member 2 corporate get-out-of-jail-free cards every year. Here's what they say. They say, go out on a limb, take responsible risks, be creative, and if you really screw something up, hand us the get-out-of-jail-free card and you're off the hook, no questions asked. On the annual reviews, the team leader will actually be disappointed with the team member if they haven't used both of them. Is it risky? Perhaps. You think that company comes up with great ideas? You bet they do. Another company I interviewed offers a Failure of the Year award. Here's what they do. They have a big award ceremony and a banquet, and they celebrate the project of the year and the team member of the year and the rookie of the year and the failure of the year. And they say this is for a person or a team that went on a limb. Everything made sense. Their numbers looked great, and guess what? It didn't work out. But instead of punishing them, they celebrate it. They say that mistakes are simply the portals of discovery. And the fact that they tried is what it's all about. The fact that they explored the possibilities. Again, think about the message that would send in your companies if you did something like that, or even close to that. Think about the ideas and the raw imagination that would come to bear on your organization. Anyone like Ben & Jerry's Cherry Garcia ice cream? All right, I see a couple of heads nodding. This stuff is just my favorite. So this ice cream, it's cherry ice cream with cherries and fudge chunks. It's just absolutely, as my daughter would say, the bomb diggity. And it's, by the way, it's a hugely successful line for Ben & Jerry's, very profitable, etc. Now, unfortunately, most of us would never have launched this product. We'd be in a brainstorming meeting, and it would go something like this. Someone says, oh, I got this great idea for ice cream. Cherry flavor, chocolate chunks, big chunks of cherry. It's going to be awesome. And then you got Jan over in legal. And Jan says something like this. Yeah, about those cherries. Listen, 1 out of 100,000 people are allergic to cherries. Pull the cherries. Then you got Jim in manufacturing. And Jim says, listen, the only thing is getting that cherry syrup into the ice cream is kind of tough. I got to put a new machine on the line. I got to retrain my people. Pull the cherry flavor. Then you got Ben in purchasing. And Ben says, those chocolate chunks are kind of expensive. We're going to deplete 0.2 cents of gross margin per unit. Pull the chocolate chunks. And what do you got? Vanilla. You got a big bowl of vanilla nothing. It's a commodity. And the world doesn't need another commodity. The world doesn't need another Me Too player. The world doesn't need another Me Too anything. So what I would suggest that you do is, as you have ideas in your team, allow those ideas to flourish. Let the best ideas shine and don't water them down with groupthink. Don't let the potency of those ideas get watered down into a commodity. So I want to share with you my absolute favorite brainstorming technique of all. In the book, I share 8 techniques that are you've probably never heard of. And this is one of them. It's called role storming. Role storming. So with role storming, and again, really fun, you can do it immediately when you leave here. It's brainstorming, but in character. So here's how it goes. If we're having a brainstorming meeting, rather than playing the role of ourselves, where we've got all kinds of fear of embarrassment and failure and everything else, you play the character of somebody else. So if we're sitting around the table, maybe one of us is Steve Jobs. Maybe one of us is Charlie Sheen. Getting by winning here. Maybe one of us is Oprah. Maybe one of us is Edison. So what happens is when you're in that session, even though it sounds a little bit goofy at first, I really encourage you to try it. Because Steve Jobs is never going to throw out a little teeny incremental idea. He's going to throw out a giant idea. And if Steve Jobs throws out a kooky idea, no one's going to laugh at Steve. Oh, that was Steve saying it. So this fun technique, besides being hysterically funny, completely removes all the barriers of fear and allows your creativity to shine. Example, at our company at ePrize, we were working to win a hotly contested client. So we were brainstorming a bunch of ideas, and we couldn't come up with something that was just real powerful. Instead, we decided to role storm. You guys ever see that TV show Mad Men? All right, a TV show about a 1960s ad agency, and these people are, very cool and fun. And anyway, we decided to role storm as the characters from this hit TV show Mad Men. So one of us is Don Draper, and one of us is Roger Sterling. Anyway, we do this. It's hysterical. We're cracking up, but more importantly, the ideas started to flow like never before. And the ideas from that brainstorm session, including, by the way, some props that we came up with, led us to win the account. Role storming in action. Try it. Give it a try. So I mentioned the book. I did want to let everybody know that if you're interested, I do have books available for purchase after this session, which should be right outside, and I'm happy to sign them if anyone wants. But if you're not going to do that, I would strongly encourage you to visit my site, which is joshlinkner.com. There's nothing to buy. It's not a sales pitch, but there are a lot of there's a weekly blog that I write. There's a lot of thought starters and brainstorming techniques and little bits of inspiration that can help you continue on your creative journey. As mentioned, I started a venture capital firm recently in Detroit. We're trying to rebuild the city of Detroit through entrepreneurship. And I wanted to give you a sense, kind of tying all this together, of how creativity is creating opportunity. How real creativity is the thing that gets funded and the things that not only consumers, but investors embrace. So we've seen one of these. You filled out a form online. You ever see one of these? Anyone like it? It's horrible, right? Like, how do you even read that? And we all have done it. We've typed it in and it's wrong. You retype it and you get angry. So if this was on an e-commerce site, for example, how silly is that? I mean, you're pissing off your clients before they even order something. So there's a few problems going on here with these things. And they just get stupider and stupider. Problem number 1 is they piss off your clients. Problem number 2 is that they're not even secure. The reason that you have these is to determine if the person is a human or if it's a computer bot that's trying to break into the system. Turns out, though, as painful as these things are, they're only 58% accurate on average. So they're not that accurate. They annoy your customers, and you have huge drop-off. In other words, people try it a few times, they get frustrated, and then they leave. So as a marketer, you spend all this money to get someone to come buy your product, you anger them, and they split. Not a good deal. So the way people have been solving this problem up until now is they keep getting more complicated and more annoying. Not working. A company in Detroit came to us, and we're in the midst of funding this company right now with a new idea. Now, I don't know if you can read it, but it says, drag 3 pepperonis and 2 mushrooms onto the middle pizza. So instead of a wavy, weird-looking letters and numbers combination, they made a game out of it. Now, the game is called a multivariant game. In other words, the next time this comes up, it might say, drag 2 green peppers and 1 black olive onto the left pizza. So because the dynamics are constantly changing, computers can't hack it as easily. The second thing is that it does a digital fingerprint, and it tracks the way that you move your mouse to solve this problem. Turns out that computers would solve it in a very different way, straight lines, very quick, where humans are a little bit less straight lines. So this digital fingerprint, they wrote an algorithm that can determine with 99.999% accuracy if it's a human or a bot. Better for the consumer, certainly a fun experience. You can put branding in it. Let's say that was for Domino's Pizza. Cool. Way more reliable, eliminates drop-off. I can't wait to write the check to fund this company. Now, the reason that we're funding them is not because they came to me with the 10,000th Groupon copycat idea. They came to me because it was something different and remarkable, and investors can't wait to fund them. And customers can't wait to buy products from companies like this. Again, originality is craved by people. That's what people are willing to pay for. That's what's going to allow you in your careers and your jobs to get ahead. So, what I'd like you to do is this. Well, actually, before that, there are 2 things that I wanted to point out on your chairs. Everyone probably grabbed one. One is a name tag and one's a little envelope. Before you open the envelope, I just want you to look at that name tag for a second. We talked about role storming. I'd like you to just think, who would you want to be in your next role storm? Are you going to be Steve Jobs? Are you going to be a famous actor, a politician, a villain? I'm a big fan of Gordon Gekko from Wall Street, by the way. So think about it. And as you leave, perhaps write your name, your fictitious name that you're going to be in your next role storm session, and stick it on. And it might be kind of fun after this conference to look around and see what other people are doing. Okay, now the magic moment. I'd like you to open up your envelopes, please. So what you have in your hands is your very own corporate get-out-of-jail-free card. And if you can get it cleared with your boss and all that, great. But more importantly, use it as a symbol for yourself. A little reminder to take risks, to go out on a limb, and realizing that all human progress is based on those that change the world. They balk the system. They imagine the possibilities. And give yourself and your team members permission to do just that. You don't want to look back and talk about all the things that you should have done or you could have done, or you don't want to look with regret when a small upstart competitor comes and eats your lunch. This can be an enabling tool to allow you to let your best ideas come on out to play. So what I would suggest in closing is this. Right now, this is your moment. This is your moment to let your creativity come on out to shine. This is your moment to try new things and imagine the possibilities. This is your moment to disregard the status quo and to shake things up. This is your moment to make a difference using creativity. And this is your moment to take your career and your companies to their true potential. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. So I know we have just a couple minutes, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. Anything you want, nothing's off limits, boxes or briefs, bring it on. We have some microphones, by the way, running around in case anyone wants to ask a question. Okay, cool. Well, I know it's been a long conference. Everyone's, kind of overwhelmed with energy. But what I, again, certainly want to invite you to do is I'll be signing books outside. And really, it's been my pleasure and honor to be here today with you. Thank you so much. Thank you.